back, everybody. You know, you're gonna see that I'm doing a kind of a two-part thing happening here because I've got my original Atari, which I've got some games on, but then I've got the Atari Gold 8, which had a few games on there that I don't have physically, so I'm playing it on there. And unfortunately, you know, that system is pretty wonky. When I pulled out the controller, it didn't work anymore. So I had to butcher the Player 2 controller, which has the same board in there, but it doesn't have all the buttons on the second controller for controlling the menu and stuff. So I had to take out the menu panel from the front of the joystick and replace that in the second controller and solder all kinds of stuff together. And I've kind of Frankenstein this thing back together, so now I have a fully functioning Player 1 controller, but there's no menu buttons right on the front of the actual Atari base system here for this thing. So having all that put aside, here we go, and let's start off with this one's going to be a physical one, and I'm in my room, so I've got the Sony CRT up, console TV, and I've got the DLP, the Samsung DLP, using the HDMI through the Atari Gold, and I've just got them side by side. I'm trying to capture them both in frame, but we're going to start with, on the left here, we got Bump and Jump, and Bump and Jump was an arcade game. Geez, I'm not even sure who made this. Exidy? I don't know. I'll look it up. But Bump and Jump was really fun in the arcade. It was a race game, but it had an extra component of you push the jump button and you can fly up in the air. You can come down, smash on your opponents. You know, you get warnings where you've got to jump over waterways and things like that. And, you know, if you jump at the wrong time, boom, you're in the water. So it's really a good conversion, if you ask me. I mean, I don't remember everything in the original one, but this seems to have most everything. You're bumping and jumping and knocking off cars and getting bonus points, and you know, it's got the thing where that you've got the little oil tanker that dumps out stuff on you, and so hey, there's nothing wrong with this. And then it says spring and summer, so I'm guessing you're going to get into the winter and fall stuff. I didn't get that far, but I'm sure it's going to go into those other seasons. Most of these games, if not all of them that are physical, still I'm getting for about $2 at Bull Moose in Maine. So, you know, I don't want to let everyone know in a way so I can still keep getting them, but that's okay. People don't tend to buy these that much, and you know what? If the secret's out, the secret's out. All right, so now we have pole position. I think it handles pretty well. I don't know if there's an option to use the paddles on this, because it just works with the joystick, but I'll have to check that out. But I was playing this with the joystick, and it worked perfectly fine. I had not plugged paddles into this yet because I hadn't gotten to the paddle games, arcade games that I've got quite yet. They're coming up. And it handled really well, even with a joystick, so I was very pleased. And I'm not sure if they could get away with it on the paddle, because you push up and down to go into low and high gear. It took me a moment to figure that out or remember how to do that. So you get to shift gears, and you know, it looks pretty good. It's I mean, we got to remember, this is an Atari 2600. It's only got so much in the graphic capabilities, you know, and it's really impressive what they were able to do, especially with racing games sometimes, because, you know, when you talk about low frame rates or crappy graphics, sometimes racing games aren't so good, like Night Driver. That was just mostly lines and stuff, and it didn't quite handle. This was like the evolution of that kind of game, which made it look a lot better. You know, you had backgrounds and you had edge of the road stuff and the center line. So again, this is a really good game, and as always, I'm telling anybody, if you can pick these games up for a couple dollars, they're well worth it, because they're pretty fun. And what's good about Atari games a lot of times is they're not games you have to invest a lot of time in. They're pick up and play, and you can just try and go for a high score, and once you're sick of it, you just put it away. So there's not a lot to invest in it, but it's more about just, you know, getting that high score with a lot of these games, and that's what makes them fun to me. They remind me of being in the arcade and just, you know, playing a game, and you're like, okay, I've had enough of this, I'm going to move on to something else, and it's not a big deal. You know, you're not stressing like, oh, I've got 40, 80 hours to put into some RPG. Not that I don't like RPGs, I love them, but sometimes I just want the quick fix, which is funny because that's what most people have today, short attention spans. So you'd think stuff like this would take off again. But we'll see. But pole position, this one gets a thumbs up from me. It's done very well. All right, next we have just the classic Asteroids. And Asteroids is always just an okay game for me. It was okay in the arcades. I mean, because it was, when it was new, it was kind of like Space Invaders. It's really cool, And when it came out on the Atari 2600, the first time I got to play it was a little before Christmas because my father got it for us. My parents did. And my mother was out bowling. I don't know if I've talked about this before. I may have. But she was out bowling on like a Wednesday night or something, and my father went in. She'd already wrapped the gifts, and he would go unwrap the gifts before Christmas for us, and he brought this out, and we played it like all evening while my mother was gone. So we got to play Asteroids before Christmas Eve or Christmas Day whenever we opened it up, and that was pretty fun. He only let us do it once, but he still let us do it because he was very excited to get this game for us. So that was a great memory. And I mean, what's nice about this version of Asteroids is it's like the Space Invaders one, which maybe I'll cover someday, but this has tens and tens of variations. Sometimes I think it might have the shield, sometimes it has the warp, you can disappear, and it's just, there's lots of variations. It's hard to remember what they all are. You'd have to look it up in the system. So, but that's just Asteroids, and it's plays perfectly fine, and it's got lots of color to it now. Hey, here's Super Cobra. I didn't know this existed on the Atari 2600. Hey, but here it is. I was at that Bull Moose the other day, and they had these games in the case. I don't know why they were locked away, but because they were only $2. But I'm like, Super Cobra? I'm like, you're kidding me. And I was just thinking, how good could this be? Well, look at this. This is pretty smooth. I like how they designed it. Well, you've only got one button, but they were clever enough to make it so you fire one time, and then the other time is a bomb. So it's fire bomb, fire bomb. I don't remember if that's how this game played. There were a lot of these games like Scramble and stuff like that were like this. But I had a heck of a good time with this. There's some really hairy spots to get through. You can see that once you get through the first round, it gets very tricky. The missiles start launching and stuff. The map gets tighter. So, I mean, this is everything you can want in a little shooter like this, like an early days kind of shooter. This is stuff from the early days of side-scrolling shooters. This isn't R-Type. Don't think you're gonna get to that level, but this is pretty friggin' good. I remember this on I think it was on the ColecoVision, and I think I'm more impressed with this version than the ColecoVision. I mean, I expected it on that. I expected nothing from this version and was absolutely floored. This was a real pleasant surprise for $2, and I can't say enough about it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and someone out there is gonna be like, it's really not that good. But it's like, no, it's pretty good. Man, does it get tight in some of these spots? But hey, there you go, Super Cobra. I didn't know it existed, but I'm glad it does, and now I got it. All right, let's talk about Polaris. Again, I'm switching over to, on the right here, on the DLP TV, which is able to handle HDMI input and do widescreen, which it's in widescreen, but obviously it's just showing 4:3 for the Atari games. Never heard of this game before in my life, never played it in the arcades, but it's kind of fun, and it's not exactly easy because you've got the first stage where you're just shooting the stuff in the air, and one of the things I've learned is that other little submarine down there, you want to take him out because he's just a nuisance when you're trying to avoid the fighter plane bullets here. So you have a few large planes at first you shoot down, and then you start getting attacked by this little plane, and it's really hard because he shoots these shots that just go straight for you. So that's difficult, and if that submarine's in the way, you can't go up and down or forward much to avoid it. And then sometimes a little I don't know what it is, like a U-boat or something scurries by and shoots at you. And then after you finish that level, you've got this next level, which is very basic. I'm sure it gets a little more difficult as you get into higher levels. I haven't played into that, but it's just kind of like zipping through a maze. So you got to get through this cleanly, and then it goes through another round, and it just, you know, cycles through that. And it's not a lot of different variation, but it's just enough to keep it fresh, I think. And I would have been pretty pleased with this back in the day. It's like having like two kinds of shooters in one, in a weird way. So I don't know what else to say about it other than that it's pretty good, and the graphics are nice. I mean, you've got the different types of ships coming after you. You got the different types of planes, and you know, it's a lot of, you know, it takes a lot of thinking and patience and practice to get good at it, because especially that little jet, that sucker is hard to get, because he is very, very aggressive, and he's flying around all the time, and he's dropping these little depth charges at you. I don't know what you'd call them, but they're like homing missiles, and once they hit the water and start taking off after, you got to avoid them. But that's Polaris, and it was in the arcade. I never saw it, but it came into the home systems, and I finally got to play it when I got this Atari Gold collection. And as far as, you know, Atari games go, this one gets a thumbs up for me also. All right, here we are. Man, I've had this on my wish list for such a long time, and when I saw this in that case of Bull Moose for $2, I was like, wait, that's Joust. Why is it only $2? It's like probably an $8 game, but then if you buy it on eBay, you got to pay, you know, $3 to $5 shipping. So, you know, okay, easily a $10 game for $2, and I'm like, I'm in. This is fantastic. So I finally got to play it. Now, is this as good as the original Joust? I mean, no, but is it far off? Not really. It's pretty good. I mean, the eggs don't drop, they float around, which is a little weird, and also the flapping, I mean, they could have made it so you had to push the flapping twice as often, I think, because if you push it a couple times, you really fly up to the top quick. So you really got to get used to pacing that, pressing the button for the flaps, or your character's going to take off. But I mean, just about everything I want's in this for an arcade port. If, you know, I love the arcade game, and in the early days, you had no chance to really play, you know, the arcade at home other than this. This handles really well. There is a 2-player version too. Now the 2-player version's a little crappy because there's just 2 players and there's only like one bird flying around, and I'm like, well, you know, that's not too cool because you're really just trying to kill each other then. But this does a real good job. It looks wicked flickery right now, but I got to tell you, this is the trick I have to do. I'm recording this in 24 frames per second, because if you record it in 30 or 60, half the screen disappears, because this is the trick they used to use where, you know, every other frame was showing a character. So when I'm playing this, it doesn't look all flickery like this. It's not flashing like it is or strobing. This is just because of the way I'm capturing it, so you can see all the items on screen. Otherwise, like, you'd see my character and all the other characters would probably just be like this really light shadow of a figure, and it wouldn't look good. So the other thing too is the pterodactyls in this. Now I don't get the pitchfork guy coming out of the lava dragging you in. I don't think that exists in here. I tried to fly a little low, but just the fact that it has, you know, the egg waves, it has the changing of the board, the landing, it has the pterodactyl, which I thought I killed right there, but obviously I haven't. I mean, I just want to play this for 10 hours straight until I kill a pterodactyl. I mean, that was always the goal, right? Is to get so good that you just hit him with that pixel perfect little bit right inside his mouth and destroy him. But this is fantastic. I mean, this is a solid port of Joust when you consider the system that it's on. So yeah, here's one if you see out there for, I would say if you like arcade ports on Atari, I'd still be willing to pay like $8 for this. But I didn't. I paid $2. I'm happy with that. But this one gets a pretty big thumbs up from me because it really does capture the heart of the game. All right, so here we have Gravitar, and Gravitar, oh my goodness, what a difficult game. I remember this in the arcade. I didn't play it much, and it's probably because it was too difficult, and I was still kind of young at the time. But I watched a video of someone play through the arcade of this game, and I think the arcade is easier to handle because there's buttons for thrusters and stuff. You're not just using one joystick, so you can thrust easier and move left and right at the same time. But this game is difficult, and not in the worst way. This game actually is one of the games that I could imagine has a lot of replay value. It's probably, I don't know how to say it. It's very frustrating, but I know I could get better at this. You've got to shoot, you're in the overworld, and you've got to go to one of the lands, and the goal is to clear all the planets or the lands, whatever you want to call them. And then you go over one of those, and then you go down onto the land, and then you have to shoot up all the little monsters, or not monsters, but the little aliens, or I don't know if they're ships or little towns that are shooting at you. You got to clean those out. You got UFO chasing you, shooting at you, and then you got little cubes that are things you're supposed to pick up and retrieve. And I mean, it's just for points, but there's so much going on. It's just so intense because of the ability to master those thrusters. This is one that I could see sinking a lot of time in and literally pulling your hair out but wanting to play more. So again, if you want a game that's got a lot of bang for the buck, this Gravitar is one of them. This is a super game. I probably will play this. I wonder, it might be easier to emulate this and map things to the keyboard so that you get more of an arcade feel. So that's it. And you know what? I've got an Atari collection. I wonder if this is on that, because I have an old Atari collection with a lot of the games from that era. And I should check that out, because I think I saw it on there, if I recall. And it would be really neat to play the original. But if you could find this, that's great too. All right, let's give Super Breakout a try. I'm going to use this one with the paddle controllers. And, here's the thing. I've got this. I want to try it on the Atari collection, because I also have the Atari 4, the Atari Flashback 4, which came with physical paddles. And I wanted to try those out on the 9 to see if they work good. And, the sad thing is it doesn't feel right. It's kind of sluggish and wonky and delayed. So, but I'm still going to show the gameplay, because this is my favorite mode, mode 7. Mode 7 was kind of called the progressive mode, where the blocks would keep coming down at you, so it was never ending. And it was really fun, because it would get really intense, because as you clear out more, the ball starts going faster. And it really relies on your reflexes quite a bit, like kind of Arkanoid or something like that. So it's super fun, and it's just a different type of game that uses the special controllers, and that's awesome. It's a simple game, like regular Breakout was, and I remember playing this a ton when I was little, because this is probably one of the most played games on the Atari for me when I was younger. There's other versions of it too. There's one where it's got some extra balls that are trapped in there that you can release, but this was always my favorite. It's really satisfying when you get the ball up there and it's just racking up the points, and it's just making all that great noise. And the funny thing is, though, is like the scoring is so low because each thing is only worth like 1 or 2 or 3 points, but it's wicked satisfying. I can't remember. I didn't get to the top on this yet, but I can't remember if the paddle gets smaller once you get to the top. But there you go. It's like Breakout, but it's Super Breakout. It's got extra stuff, so that's awesome. Here's basketball. There was an arcade version of this, which looked much better and played a bit better. But if you wanted to play basketball at home at the time, you could have done, I don't know if you could have done worse. I don't know if there was anything else out. The graphics are crappy. The basketball hoops are horrible. The physics of the ball are crazy. I'm playing against a computer, and it's not easy to beat the computer because the computer hardly misses, and it's hard to steal from the computer, but the computer will steal from you if, you know, and I'm sure there's difficulty modes. Maybe I'm on the difficult mode right now, but it's a simple game. It's fun, and I'm sure there were kids that really had a great time playing this one-on-one game back in the day for what it was worth. I mean, hell, it's a lot better than playing Pong, that's for sure. I mean, if I had to play between choosing Pong or something like this is a lot more action-packed. Would I recommend playing this? Yeah, I'd recommend trying it out a few times. I don't think you're gonna, you know, maybe play it till you beat the computer player, and then you're like, well, that's that, you know. I can imagine there were people that maybe had tournaments, you know, 5 or 6 kids were there, so they'd play against each other and they'd have a tournament mode or something. That's something where you could spend, you know, an hour and just run through some brackets or something. So there's got to be ways to make it a little more exciting, and maybe they place a little money on it, like a quarter or something. But I don't know if you know, that's considered gambling back in the day. Things were a lot looser, but it's a way to make something like this more exciting, and I'm sure it happened. I mean, if anyone out there has memories of playing this game when you were younger and you were like just the champ of the street or something, you know, let me know. Again, it's probably a pass for most people, but I think it's worth experiencing. If you play a couple rounds, you'll get the idea, and you'll be like, well, I could imagine back in the late 70s this could have been fun. I don't even know if it came out in the late 70s or this was I think this was a late 70s one, because I think it's one of the early games. So there we go. That's basketball. An arcade clone, if you can hear me putting up those air quotes. All right, now here we have Vanguard, SNK game, early SNK. Yeah, that's the Neo Geo people. That's right. So SNK, you know, made lots of great games for the NES too, and lots of good stuff with Neo Geo. Crystallis, I think that's the way you're supposed to pronounce it, for an RPG or an action RPG, whatever you want to call it, on the Nintendo. But they had lots of arcade games, and I played this one quite a bit because this was in the early days of Aladdin's Castle, and there weren't a lot of games yet filling up the place that weren't pretty basic. We hadn't gotten to the point of suddenly there's you know, Donkey Kong and stuff like that yet. So this was a game that was pretty fun. Lots of shooters and stuff like that, and Asteroids and Space Invaders still. But this one was kind of cool because there was extra angles to it. You're doing a side-scrolling shooter, and then you're going up or down. And, you know, you had the invincibility option. Usually I could get through a round or two, so it was good to drop a quarter in and be able to have that quarter last about 10 minutes, I'd say. And it was unique because you could shoot in all directions, too. And, you know, if you get the energy things, then you just were, for a short time, just totally invincible. You could plow into everything. So, yeah. Nothing wrong with this. It was an advanced shooter for its time, and this is a pretty good arcade conversion when you consider what the original was like. And again, a lot of people that got these games, you know, they weren't like me. I lived right behind a mall at the time, so I had access to an arcade. There were so many kids that, you know, maybe they went to the arcade once every few months or something, you know, if their parents went shopping at the mall, or maybe never. You know, there were lots of kids that never got to experience arcades, so this was their only way. Maybe this is how they experienced them, and they never really even played the arcade version. So it really impressed me when they would make arcade conversions like this for the Atari that were very true to the arcade game that it was based on. And Vanguard is definitely one of those. So again, big thumbs up for Vanguard here. All right, now switching over to Circus Atari, a game that was ripped off often on other computers and stuff. Like we had the TRS-80 and Clowns and Balloons, I think it was called, was on there. It's a game my wife really enjoyed when she was a kid. And I mean, this is based off of Circus, which was in the arcades for Atari. I remember playing this. One of those early memories of the first games I played, other than pinball, when I was really young. So, a lot of these were either black and white, or sometimes they may have things like foil across. Not a foil. I don't know. It's almost like a saran wrap, but it's like a layer of coloring that they put so things would have color to them, like the balloons would have color, but everything was really black and white. So when this came, and it used like a spinner controller, but when this came to the Atari, this was a great one. This is one that would get played often. It's funny, we had to have this because I remember playing it, but I wonder if it wasn't ours, or if we lent someone the cartridge or something, because I don't remember having it forever, but I know I played it a good bit. And it's probably, these are the games that I probably played enough that you got sick of them. But going back, it's like these are still pretty fun, because it's just about how long you can keep these guys up in the air. And it's pretty cool because you got the mechanics of the paddle going back and forth. You got the guys that can be, you got to make sure that they hit the teeter-totter thing there to launch each other. And then also, you can flip the teeter-totter. And depending on how many times they've jumped and on what angles, you get different angles, you get different height. So, I mean, it could just go crazy fast sometimes too. But it's one of those games where you don't have time to think. You're just reacting. And some of those games are the best games because 4 or 5 minutes go by and it feels like it was seconds because you didn't have a moment. You're not going to think about like, oh, I got to do this at work, or I got homework, or anything like that. You're not going to think about anything but the game because you're spinning that paddle, you're flipping it, you're watching these guys jump, you're wondering how they're going to bounce off of things. The angles are crazy. They get caught up in the balloons. Sometimes they just shoot right back down. Sometimes they hang up there for 2-3 seconds. So this is a really fun one, and again, something you can't experience without the special controllers. And also, those same controllers that I was playing Super Breakout with on here, you could see how well I'm doing on this because it played perfectly smooth. So the controllers aren't the problem. It's the way that the emulation on that Atari was handling it. And I can imagine people playing that Atari collection, or even now, I don't know if they fixed it with the newest stuff out, but it's so important to make the paddles work properly and have the right timings with the console, because it should be extremely fluid and not herky-jerky or like sluggish or like rubber bandy feeling, like stretchy. I don't know how to explain it, but that's how it was on the other thing. But there you go. More arcade classics ported to the Atari. There's another 11 for you guys, and it's probably going to be my last one. And I hope you enjoyed this. I had to do it this way with the 2 screens. I hope it didn't bother anybody. Maybe it's a little more exciting, actually. But I just want to thank you guys again for watching. And I've got others if you want to see and you want to watch some Atari arcade clones. Decide for yourself if you want to pick some up. Again, don't go out there and spend $15, $20 on these games. This is just stuff I want you to see and be aware that it exists. So if you find it out in the wild for, $2, $3, $4, it's worth picking up if you still have an Atari system. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. So long.